On the 27th of November 2017, Spiked magazine hosted a debate titled Is the Left Eating Itself? And within it, Laura Kipnis, Angus Johnston and Brendan O'Neill argued that it's not, while Bret Weinstein argued that it is.
I think there are a couple of ways that we can answer this question. One is yes. Another would be yes, of course it is. I mean, that may be my lived experience speaking here, but it seems so transparently obvious that that is what is going on that I feel inclined really to move on to the more interesting question, which is why is the left eating itself?
Now, if you're familiar with my work, then you likely know that I tend not to publicly touch politics, at least not directly. But truth be told, I've always known that I would in time, and because this topic is so close to my heart, I think it's a great place to start. This is the Left Eating Itself? These days, claims that the left are falling apart are absolutely everywhere. Hell, you need only watch a single YouTube video of Ben Shapiro for the algorithm to incessantly suggest such titles as Ben Shapiro destroys leftist, Jordan Peterson destroys leftist host, and Milo Yiannopoulos destroys emotional liberal. But do you know what? As much as it originally surprised me, in many cases these videos do actually deliver. The people within them that represent the left and the arguments that they use are often embarrassingly poor. But here's the thing, these people, these arguments, they're not liberal, at least not in the classical sense, but I'll get back to that point later. For now, here's Bret explaining his position.
For the moment, what I want to do is suggest a kind of approach to understanding why this really is the left that is attacking some of us who all our lives would have called ourselves leftists. And the first thing I would suggest is that we may have a basic problem with the game theory of progressivism. It is quite possible that what is taking place is that the left has a bad actor problem. What I'm witnessing in the present are bad actors that have control over the entire dialogue, and that is a very dangerous situation.
So, is Bret correct here? Or, to ask this question obliquely, when Bret criticised Evergreen for requesting that all white students and staff not attend campus for the day, did the left endorse those who called for his resignation? Was it left-endorsed actors who prevented Brendan from participating in an abortion debate simply because he doesn't have a vagina? Did Cathy Newman really represent the left when she implied that Jordan's right to free speech comes second to someone else's right not to be offended? Did the left really endorse the authors, journalists and news outlets that call Sam Harris and Douglas Murray a racist simply because they're concerned by the number of Muslims that support punishing homosexuals? These are pivotal questions, and here's why Bret thinks the answer to at least most of them is yes.
The first thing that I recognized a bit before things went haywire at Evergreen, or at least went haywire publicly, was that the people I was talking to, and most of the population at Evergreen is pretty far left, but I recognized that there was a hidden dichotomy between two populations within the left. One of those populations earnestly wishes equality, and there can be some debate over what it is that is being equalized, but virtually everybody on the left would say that they are for equality of opportunity. Then there is another population that does not wish equality of opportunity. What it wishes to do is to turn the tables of oppression. And the problem for us is that when these two populations are intermingled, they sound alike. And the most confusing aspect of it is that the people who are earnestly seeking something like equality of opportunity are unaware that they have signed up with something unholy and un-American.
Now this is a very interesting claim, and if true, it's arguably the most important political insight of our time. But it raises the immediate question, if this is really the case, then why haven't those who are earnestly pursuing equality of opportunity noticed those who are insidiously pursuing a flip of oppression? Well, Bret provides several compelling reasons.
One of the consequences of this dichotomy, the bad actors having taken control of the movement, is that they have begun to erect structures that lead a lot of people to sign up before they really know what it is that they're signing up for. So you'll find across the dialogue of the left at the moment, you'll find words that once upon a time had a definition that you might have struggled a little bit to resurrect it, but you could have figured out what words like equity probably meant. And those words have taken on very different meanings in the present. And they're actually part of a larger structure. So we have what I would call linguistic booby traps. We have policy proposals on college campuses and elsewhere that are actually Trojan horses that are described as pursuing one thing, but actually serve a function other than the one that is on the title page. And then we have stigma that is playing an incentivizing role, or actually more correctly, a disincentivizing role. So people like myself who stand up against policy proposals that put my institution in jeopardy find ourselves faced with a social penalty for having done so.
So to briefly and very simply summarise, Bret argues that the left is currently comprised of two parties. One party that wishes for equality of opportunity, but whose population, at large, is falling for linguistic booby traps and Trojan horses. And a second party that wishes to flip the tables of oppression, and aims to do so by obfuscating language and relying on the first party's lack of attention. Now, if you ask me, that's a good argument. But before I respond to it, I want to provide what was, in my opinion, the best rebuttal against it, and it came from Brendan.
My answer to the question, is the left eating itself, is no. For the simple reason that what we have on campuses in the US and the UK today is not left. This hyper-racial consciousness, this insistence on female fragility, this paranoid philistinism so that books are defaced with trigger warnings and everything from tabloid newspapers to sexy pop songs can be banned. This disavowal of your own autonomy, your own adulthood, and you're pleading with bureaucracy to provide you with psychic comfort. This use of racial phrases like white men, as if all white men have the same privilege, as if class, the building block of left politics, was irrelevant or such a small thing that it didn't bear talking about. None of this is left. They are not left. I know this sounds like semantics, but it's incredibly important that we get this right. I know they call themselves left, but North Korea calls itself a democratic republic. People lie. And more importantly, people use progressive phrases to disguise reactionary agendas.
Now, within this speech, Brendan does a fantastic job of emphasising that something is eating the left, and makes a reasonable case for why we shouldn't consider it left. But in doing so, he makes quite clear, to me at least, that him and Bret are on the same side in all but name. They both see the problem, but they disagree on what to call it. So, where exactly do I stand on this one? Well, at the present, I'm with Bret. I'm currently convinced that the left is indeed eating itself, and while I hold this position for all the same reasons as Bret, my primary reason was ironically conveyed by Brendan later in the debate.
I think what we have to recognize is that on campus right now, we face something far worse than left versus left, or left versus right, or the alt-right coming in and stirring things up, and left-wing people crying as a consequence. We face a generation that has been schooled to reject Enlightenment thought, schooled to reject due process, schooled to reject freedom of speech, schooled to reject the ideal of autonomy, and encouraged to see themselves as fragile and weak and requiring bureaucratic therapeutic scaffolding in every area of their lives. That is not left. That is the opposite of left. That is the opposite of radical, and it needs to be challenged by everyone who seriously considers themselves to be a left-wing person.
You see, I've literally lost sleep over this observation. My generation and those after have indeed been schooled to reject Enlightenment thought, and yet most of my generation considers themselves left. And so while I think Brendan's correct when he says that prioritising offence over free speech and censoring opposing views is not liberal, I'm not so certain that it's not left. Sure, it's definitely not left in the classical sense, but the question is it left in the current sense? Or to ask this question obliquely, does a considerable proportion of the left, that being primarily its younger generations, favour regressive policies? For example, do a considerable proportion of young US Democrats favour silencing opposing views? Yes, they do. Do a considerable proportion of Remainers, who are overwhelmingly left, insist on a second referendum because they don't like the democratic result of the first?
The British people have spoken. No, they haven't.
Yes, they do. And hence, because these people represent a considerable proportion of the modern left is indeed eating itself. It's at civil war, and it's about time, to echo Brendan's sentiment, that those who are falling for these booby traps, which may or may not include yourself, realise this. The classical left really does face a serious threat, and we, can no longer afford to ignore it. Anyhow, what are your thoughts? Assuming that you acknowledge that something is eating the left, would you call this something left? And why? And what can we do about it? As I said earlier, I don't have the answers here, but I'm damn interested in yours, and I will do my best to read them all. I currently stand with Bret, but rational discourse more than stands a chance to convince me otherwise. As always, thank you kindly for the view, and an extra special thank you to my wonderful patrons and those of you who have donated via PayPal. Oh, and I realised that I'm a bit behind on the monthly giveaway, so next video I'm going to give away 2 books. So keep your eyes peeled for that one. Until next time, my fellow apes, until next time.